Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is the Samsung Odyssey G7. This is the 32-inch version of Samsung's Odyssey lineup, and a larger version of the 27-inch G7 that I reviewed previously, and a smaller version of the G9, which is my main daily driver. Now, this is a 1440p monitor with 1 millisecond response time, 16:9 aspect ratio, 1000R curve, HDR 600 and a number of other highlights to it. As I said, it's the 32-inch version, and it is actually the one I was initially going to go for because 32 inches in my mind is a good size for a gaming monitor. Nice and large, allows you to make the most of a good bit of space on your desk and get some great visuals. As you can see from these shots here, the G7 and 32-inch looks fantastic, and a range of different games, playing Dirt 5, Rainbow Six Siege, a little bit of Valheim, which is awesome by the way, and just thoroughly enjoying using this monitor. I was powering it with the Asus G15 gaming laptop, but also on my main desktop and seeing how it handles it. Now, as I said, this is a 240 Hertz panel, so you can potentially get a massive refresh rate out of it depending on the performance of your machine and how it stacks up, and obviously the games you're playing. You can see, for example, I'm only getting about 60 to 70 FPS at maximum settings in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but that isn't surprising on a 1440p panel with everything cranked up. Yet in something like Rainbow Six Siege was pushing nearly 200 FPS, so making the most of that 240 Hertz panel and getting the glorious response time from it. Now, I've tried to capture this from a multitude of angles, but I don't think I'll be able to do it full amount of justice, in that it's a very nice looking screen. Really colourful, really colour rich, and I'll include all the specifications and everything you need to know in terms of the colour accuracy in the description if you're interested in that sort of thing. But just been using it for working and for gaming and just watching Netflix and all sorts of other things during the day, and been thoroughly enjoying it. Now, when I reviewed the G7, I said I really liked that screen. It was nice for a multitude of reasons, the 27-inch versions, but I returned it. I'd purchased it from Amazon and I had to send it back because I found that the 1000R curve was far too steep for a 27-inch monitor, and I felt like it was a lot smaller than it actually was. I'd gone from a 27-inch 4K flat panel screen to the curved 1440p G7 27-inch and found that it just felt too small by comparison. I couldn't get on with it. So I was interested to see, once I'd got this out of the box, how it stacked up, considering you get a few more extra inches in the 32-inch model, but obviously no extra pixels because it's still 1440p, so it's still the same resolution, mostly the same specs, it's just a bit larger. However, I am happy to report it is fantastic, and I definitely would think this is the option to go for if I was buying it. I have not purchased it. Samsung sent this for review purposes. I actually will be sticking to my G9 as a daily driver, but if you're interested in a 32-inch model, then stick with me as we go through what this is like. Now, the G7 32-inch includes a lot of the same features as the 27-inch, and the setup and design of it. It comes with a wall bracket in the box. It also comes with a DisplayPort cable, a large power brick as you saw. It has this infinity core at the back, a cover for your cables and other things that I'll show you as I'm setting it up. The setup process for these monitors is also really easy. It basically has a bracket that you screw onto the back of the monitor, a stand that it goes on, and then some easy adjustment. One of the things that I'll show later on is that the 32-inch, like the 27-inch, can be used in both horizontal and vertical positions. So if you want to have it alongside your other monitor in that vertical position instead of the standard traditional setup, then you can do that. However, the curve on it might make that a bit odd. If you're thinking about using it for chat or stream things, then it might be a bit of an odd one, but it is possible, and I'll show you that later on. But it does have a bit of a quirk to it. Now, as I said, it comes with this stand which screws into the back, and that stand process is really easy to set up. Also allows for some clever cable management and for the display of the infinity core, which I'm going to show you a bit later on as well. And once again, it's just a case of screwing it down and getting it in place. Really simple to do, but this chassis at the back allows not only for the movement upwards and downwards and sort of back and forth, and as well obviously switching between vertical and horizontal, but also for the cable management and keeping things neat and tidy around the back, which you'll see I haven't done that much because I'm switching between two desks and desktop and a laptop during this testing process. So forgive the cable mess, just focus on the screen. Now there's a mount bracket that goes at the back here, which basically makes the most of the infinity core lighting. So basically there's a light at the back of this monitor that shines a light on your wall, or is designed to. As I'll show in a minute, I don't really think much of the infinity core lighting system. I didn't think much of it on the G9, didn't think much of it on the other G7. It's kind of gimmicky and not very effective, a bit unnecessary if I'm honest. Don't really know why that's included. It's very basic. The stand itself, though, as you'll see, just screws on. Simple mounting system, really easy to do. There is a slight bit of wobble in the screen that you'll notice later on as I go through the menu system, but otherwise it's fairly sturdy on the desk and allows for some really simple and easy adjustment in a multitude of directions, so you can really get it the way you want it to. Also, the stand isn't too large, so it doesn't take up a massive amount of room on your desk in terms of depth either, which is really nice. And so generally speaking, I really like these Odyssey monitors. They are satisfying in a number of ways. The design's been well thought out. The overall style of it, as you'll see here, the back panel looks really nice. Got this really cool finish to it. Also has things like that little notch thing that you could see there, which is a headphone stand. So if you're not using your headphones, you can pop them out of the way and store them when you're not using them, which is pretty nifty. Now, one of the things I did when I reviewed 49-inch G9 was to show the curve, because a 1000R curve is a bit hard to do justice in terms of what that might look like. I think putting it on the desk like this shows you how big the gap is. And just to demonstrate that, in a second I'll be using a mouse. On the G9 I used both my fists to demonstrate how big that is, because it's quite a big thing, but it's a lot bigger monitor. This is obviously a 32-inch, it's not too bad, just over about 1.5 mice in terms of height, so you don't really notice the curve on that one terribly, I don't think. You can see it when you're playing and working on it, and you've probably seen it from some of the clips in this video, but it's certainly not as strong, or at least it doesn't appear as strong on 32 inches as it did on the 27, so it's not as bad. You'll see there are connections for DisplayPort. You've got 2 DisplayPort connections and HDMI. You also has USB pass-through cable and then 2 USB cables on there, as well as the power connection. So basically you can do a pass-through cable to your PC, and then you can plug a couple of peripherals into the monitor if that's something you want to do to manage the cable system. And you can also manage those cables at the back really nicely as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. One of the things I like about this monitor setup and the other G9 and the other G7 is the button management. So the buttons on it has a really simple interface, and I'll show you more on that in a minute, but it's just basically a single control button that does everything. It does the power, and it goes through all the menus, and it's really simple and easy to use, and it's right in the middle of the screen, so there's no messing about. As you can see, the back of the monitor is clean and hassle-free. A lot of other monitors I've tried in the past, they have a multitude of buttons at the back. You have to reach around the back to turn it on and to adjust settings, and I'm trying to work out which buttons are which when you're doing that. Can be a real pain sometimes. With this one, it's really simple. Here you can see that headphone stand that I was talking about. It just flicks out from the back, so if you have some wired or wireless headphones that you just want to dock and put them out of the way when you're not using them, you can easily do that. The back of the stand also unclips with a little bit of convincing, and then you'll see there's some cable management channeling. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm just showing what you do with that. This isn't by means the full thing. Obviously you can run 2 DisplayPort cables or HDMI cable as well, and there's picture by picture and picture in picture options within the setup as well, which I'll show you a bit later on and discuss that. And there is a clever hook system which basically allows you to run your cable up and over that hook, then into the back stand, down through the cable management system and down the bottom. You can get all these cables in there, so if you even ever just have a basic setup with the DisplayPort and the power cable, you can run those through that, and then obviously out at the bottom of your desk. The cover then goes on the rear. The cover was one of the things that I found to be a bit fiddly. I didn't have a problem with it on the G9, but on the G7 it was a bit fiddly and not terribly easy to get on, but obviously that's not something you're going to be taking off and putting back on regularly. And there you have it, the finished product with that cable coming out the back. Obviously I've not plugged in the power cable at this point because I knew I was going to be moving it around. Now, onto the Infinity Core lighting system. Here you can see the button that I was talking about for controlling the monitor. You can get into the menu system, and I'll cover the menu system a bit later on. But basically this allows you to go through there, and you'll notice the core lighting. You can change the front and back. So if you look on the right and left hand side of the front, you'll notice the RGB lighting zones flashing there. But also at the rear, you have this Infinity Core lighting module, which basically gives off a different color light depending on what you've selected from that menu. It's not reacting to the games or anything exciting like that. It's just a standard light with either various like flashing themes or a static color. But as you can see, yes, I've got a lot of lighting going on in my room for the purpose of capturing video. I have a Philips Hue light strip along the back of the desk. There's a couple of lights on the desk, and I have lights for video, so it's kind of overpowering it. But even sitting in a dark room, I really haven't noticed much in the way of that lighting shining on the back wall. You will, however, see that there are lighting nodes here on either side of it, and those actually also shine out underneath. So what you do find is the light shines onto the desks. I actually noticed it shining on the desk below the monitor, which looks kind of nifty, but again, it's kind of a gimmick, I think. It doesn't really add anything to it, unless you believe that RGB gives you extra FPS, which, yes, we know is true. It does look kind of nice with those zones at the bottom, but I just think they're a bit unnecessary and they don't really add anything that exciting to the overall setup. I certainly would consider something like Philips Hue light strips or Corsair's LS100 light strips, or even NZXT's Hue monitor lighting system. Those are fantastic. If you add those additions to the back of your monitor or to your desk area, you can sync them with games and you can get some much nicer and more satisfying lighting experiences. Now, within the settings menu, you can see a multitude of things. It has adaptive sync, it has 240 Hz refresh rate. You can adjust the response time between standard, faster, fastest and fastest, and you can go through a load of other settings too. You'll see there's all sorts of things in here. I covered a lot of these similar settings in the previous videos on the other G7 and on the G9, but I didn't have any issues with going between these settings and changing things. As I said, it's a G-Sync compatible monitor, so if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can make the most of that. You'll notice there's adaptive sync. You'll also see you've got 240 Hz refresh rate, and it lets you know what's active at that time. But just to double check, if you go into the system settings, you'll see a resolution set 1440p as it should be. Go to advanced display settings and you'll see the refresh rate is currently 239.958 Hertz. Also note the bit depth is 8-bit and it's on the standard dynamic range, but there is HDR 600, so if you have capable games, turn HDR on within those games and the monitor will automatically switch HDR on. That's something I said about the previous Odyssey G9 and the G7, is the intelligence it has in terms of turning the HDR on and off, which is really nice because you don't have to worry about messing around in the monitor's menu in order to turn it off. It does it on automatically. You can also adjust between a number of different setup options in terms of the visuals. So you can change the picture mode to custom, FPS, cinema, dynamic contrast and things like that. And another thing I really like is the eye saver mode, which basically eliminates a lot of the harsh blue light throughout the day and takes that away. I use that when I'm working and I'm looking at the web a lot, or I'm in spreadsheets or documents or whatever else we might be doing during the day. It takes a lot of that harshness off. And obviously it's not something you use in gaming, but it really is good just generally throughout the day. And you can see there's a multitude of other options in here, and it's all accessed from that single button, which also doubles as the power button, which is a simple yet fantastic design aspect. Another thing you've seen here is that picture by picture. I'm going to cover that a bit more at the end, talk about how that works and what you need in order to access it and what to do with it. A quick close-up and you can see the different options. You have high bright, RPG, AOS, sRGB, cinema, dynamic contrast. You can flick between these on the fly when you're in games and obviously adjust everything the way you want it, but the eye saver mode is definitely a real seller for me. Now, I played a variety of games on this monitor, as I said. Some of them modern, fast-paced, fast refresh games, making the most of the visuals, both on the G15 laptop, which has a 3070 GPU on it, and then on my own desktop, which is an NVIDIA RTX 3090, and pushing the limits of this. And if you're interested in the performance of that, I have the benchmarks in my G15 video, which you can check out, but you can see an FPS counter in the top left of the monitor here, so getting about 50 FPS, so not really making the most of the monitor in this mode, but that is with Dirt 5 cranked up to maximum settings. But I wanted to demonstrate the difference between those and how you can either get a glorious visual experience with this monitor with the settings on maximum and just brilliant color range and a really good visual experience to it, and I found that it's been really nice. This is a 16:9 monitor, so standard traditional widescreen. It's not ultra wide or anything. It's just a 32-inch screen with that 1440p display, and 1440p makes a big difference over 1080p. And if you've got the power to be able to drive it and still get a decent FPS, then you can make the most of the other settings. Obviously, the 240 Hz is aimed more at sort of competitive games. If you're running on something like Csgo or Rainbow Six Siege or Apex Legends, Fortnite, something like that, you'll probably get a much higher FPS, better refresh rate, you'll find a much smoother experience, and it'll be great in terms of the delivery of the ultimate edge for your gaming goodness. And you can make the most of DLSS and push your machine to give you a really good gaming experience all around. But you can see from these shots, it looks fantastic. The colors are really good, brightness, the visuals on it is really nice. I had no problems with dead pixels or any oddities in the display. There's no light bleed of any sort around the edges or anything like that. Really have been very pleased with this screen and what I've seen from it. I've not had any issues at all with it. Actually, it's been really good. For the last 2.5 weeks I've been using this on a daily basis, gaming and working and just having a blast with it. And you'll see a multitude of games running at different angles. Now you can see a bit of Rainbow Six Siege. Just saying earlier on, if you have games like this which aren't quite as intensive, it's a bit of an older game, but it's still, you know, an esports game a lot of people will play still, and it's very popular. Csgo is another one, not quite as intensive as something like Call of Duty or Cyberpunk 2077, something that's a bit more modern. But you can see still pushing up to the high, nearly 200 FPS on this, and that's with settings on maximum as well, and that's running from a laptop as well, so it's likely to get even better performance on a desktop. But you can see we're really making the most of that 240 Hz and getting some good kills out of it and really enjoying it. Now, another thing I wanted to demonstrate is the vertical and horizontal differences. So you can lift that monitor up and tip it ever so slightly and then turn it all the way around. So you would be able to put it in this position if you want to, so you could have it alongside a standard monitor setup. But one thing of note is that you do need to tip it into the right position, because if you try and turn it, it will bang on the desk otherwise. The 27-inch went between these two modes a lot more easily. However, I do think that maybe the 1000R curve might be a bit too much to put it in that position. It might look a bit strange. Obviously with the curve you're really meant to be looking left to right, and you probably won't notice it as much. Another thing I wanted to show off is this alongside the 49-inch G9, which is a 32:9 aspect ratio monitor. What you'll notice is it isn't that much shorter than the G7. A lot of people will say, oh, you don't get much height in the G9. This is actually a short point about how there isn't that much difference in super ultra wide in terms of the height versus your standard 16:9 setup on something like the G7. So the G9 is my preference. But now I wanted to talk about picture by picture. This was something I covered when I did the G9, because I wanted to be able to show how you could split that into two 16:9 monitors with 1440p. You can do the same thing with the G7 on the 32-inch and the 27-inch version. If you plug in two DisplayPort cables or one DisplayPort and HDMI from different sources, or even from the same source, you can then split the screen in half and have it set up in different ways. There's picture by picture and there's picture in picture. This is in picture by picture mode, so I've essentially split the screen straight down the middle, and I've got two different displays set up. So it's taking two DisplayPort connections and splitting them in two, and you can see you can have it on the left and the right, and then you can basically treat them like windows. And you'll see they're kind of narrow, they're quite narrow It comes out with a resolution of 1280 by 1440, so it's a bit of an odd resolution, and it ends up not being terribly useful. On the 49-inch G9, it was a lot more useful because you could basically split it into two 16:9 monitors, two 560 by 1440, so it's a lot more traditional monitor by monitor setup, but it is possible to do. So if you want to do it and you want to have picture in picture from a laptop, or picture by picture with laptop on one side and a computer on the other, and that's fine. I don't think you'll end up gaming like this, so you certainly wouldn't find that was very useful. Another point of note is you'll see it's gone to 60 Hz refresh rate instead of 240. You could probably play around with the settings and adjust that and change it. I found, for example, I could get 120 Hz refresh rate on the G9. I expect the same is true on this, but I don't think you'll be using picture by picture mode. I certainly wouldn't see any uses for it. Be interested to see if anybody has thoughts on how they'd use that. Let me know in the comments, because I'm curious to see what people might think they would use that for. But all in all, the Odyssey G7 32-inch has been a lot better to use than the 27-inch version, so I definitely think it's worth springing for the extra. It is a few £100s, a few $100 more than the 27-inch model, and it might be a bit harder to get hold of. I found it was a bit hard to get hold of, which is why I ended up with a smaller one and then regretted it, but I think it's worth saving for or hanging on for. I personally wouldn't swap my G9 for this, but it is still fantastic, and if you prefer 16:9 and you like that extra height, then this is worth going. The 1000R curve is not too steep this time, and it looks magnificent. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions. Be sure to check out my other videos on the 27-inch and on the G9 if you've not seen them already, if you're interested to find out more about those and see how they stack up. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Hope you found it useful, interesting, hilarious, or all of the above. Be sure to check out the description for other information you might find interesting, and subscribe and watch these other videos as well that I think might be useful to you, and have a great life.